A founding member of Atlanta Rhythm Section, Rodney Justo. We are monitoring the Supreme Court, the breaking news banner right now across the cable networks. Any moment, the Supreme Court expected to release opinions. Maybe one of those opinions that is released is about presidential immunity. As soon as we get word from the Supreme Court, we'll bring it to you live here on 95.5 WSB. If you missed yesterday's show, we went in depth on Marietta City Schools deciding to ban smartphones for all middle schoolers. Grant Rivera, the superintendent of Marietta Schools.
If there is a medical reason why a child needs to check their cell phone, they're not doing that in class. They will do that in a separate place with a caring adult who can accommodate whatever their need may be.
Not only is this ban going to happen in Marietta City Schools, but also in one of the largest school districts in the nation, Los Angeles, California. Joining us on that part of the story from ABC News, it's Brad Garrett. Brad, what has there been the reaction been like in L.A. to their system-wide cell phone ban for all schools?
Well, I think to a certain extent the reaction by parents are mixed, because I think obviously phones allow parents to get a hold of their kids immediately. I think the trade-off here is obviously, why do they need a phone if they're in the confines of a school? And the reality is they don't. And many studies by social psychologists and others have clearly suggested that phones, in particular in school, they're a distraction. And the more kids are on phones, the more that their brains are getting rewired to sort of being addicted to the phone. And it's if you look also at studies starting in the 2010s when smartphones came out, you see this steady decline in the number or increase in the number of kids that have depression issues, that have anxiety issues. And because of this rewiring, the belief is that it's really making them less empathetic and less able to concentrate, because all of these dopamine hits of this visual stuff they're seeing on their phones or tablets all the time. They're not going to go away, obviously, but I think the key is you have to reduce the amount of time they spend on phones and tablets.
Interesting. Now, I just assumed that because they are so addictive, right? I mean, I'm an adult and I'm addicted to my smartphone, that it was more than the social aspect of it and what that study said. It's just a distraction in the classroom. If the student is on their phone, looking at their phone, they're not listening to the teacher, and the teacher can't perform the lesson plan. To me, that seems like a bigger issue when it comes to education.
Well, certainly as far as education, just as important as the issue is that the more time they spend on those phones, as I mentioned earlier, it's also rewiring their brains. Children and adolescents, our brains are very vulnerable because they're still developing, and that these studies certainly suggest that the bombardment of what comes through social media, many times via your phone, is really having harmful effects on kids that are going to take them into adulthood with certain sort of disabilities, in effect, that they wouldn't have had otherwise. I mean, the other big part of this is that by spending more time on phones and tablets, kids they're doing less stuff in person. And that's where you learn how to deal with people. So there's this built-in fragility that's apparently occurring in kids that spend too much time because they don't have to deal with people, right? You can say and do almost anything you want on social media. You have to do it in person, you may get beat up, and you're going to have to deal with saying these hateful things, without your phone or your tablet. So it's all of this combined that makes it, in my view, and the people who study this stuff's view, is that you've got to limit phones and tablets, and the parents in particular have to be the sheriff here.
Brad Garrett, ABC News on the Mark Arum Show. Mixed reaction from the parents. What about the teachers? Have we heard from the teachers' unions in L.A. County? What do they think about the ban?
I can just tell you, in conversations with the teachers in my son's school, I mean, they don't think phones should be anywhere near school, or bring them to school, which is typically what happens. You go to school and then you lock them up. They place their lockers, and you don't get them until school ends, whenever that is. So I think the school, the teachers, I would assume, would be generally supportive of this.
Considering L.A. is such a massive school district, and we saw it here locally in Marietta, Georgia, do we think this is going to start a trend? We're going to see more of these bans nationwide?
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the radio for the last hour plus, and at least two stations have talked about their jurisdictions. The school districts have come up with a ban of cell phones during school hours.
Is there a chance we see a parent or a set of parents so against this that they take to litigation to try to negate these cell phone bans?
Well, it shouldn't surprise either one of us because it's sort of the common route to go when you don't agree with something today, is to go after to the court system. So that wouldn't surprise me.
All right, we're going to continue to follow the story in the show. Brad Garrett, ABC News. Brad, thanks for your time.
Anytime. Take care.
I'm curious to see if we're going to see other jurisdictions in the metro area follow suit with Marietta. All right, we're monitoring the Supreme Court. I just got this push alert. Supreme Court has upheld a Trump-era tax on overseas investments, rejecting an argument from a Washington state couple in a case that could have jeopardized existing tax provisions and torpedoed Democratic talk of a wealth tax. I have no idea what the heck that means. CNN is discussing what the Supreme Court, their first decision today, was just handed down.
Thomas loses, he might be in dissent, and Bear will be with the Chief Justice. Now, I was an idiot because I just made a public prediction, and I could look like a total fool.
So that's a former clerk for the Supreme Court talking right now with Jim Acosta on CNN. Stand by, please, because I can't make heads or tails of that. Supreme Court today upheld a Trump-era tax on overseas investment, rejecting an argument from a Washington state couple in a case that could have jeopardized existing tax provisions and torpedoed Democratic talk of a wealth tax. I have no idea what that means. But we're starting to hear decisions from the Supreme Court. Will we hear the big one today about presidential immunity? Let's go up to Capitol Hill right now. This is Sunland Sephardi.
Calling him out and asking him very directly, essentially, what exactly are you doing to investigate these growing ethics scandals that are plaguing these two justices that are sitting on the Supreme Court? They note that Roberts...
All right, so Sunland's talking about Democratic congressman asking Chief Justice Roberts what he's going to do about oversight with, the trips that Thomas took and Alito's flag thing. So that has nothing to do with what the Supreme Court's going to do. All right, they wrote a letter to Chief Justice John Roberts. So that has nothing to do with what's going on with today on the Supreme Court decision. But the first decision has been handed down today by the Supreme Court. Will we hear more decisions? And will we hear about the big one, the presidential immunity? We'll continue our team coverage next on The Mark Arum Show.